Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be taking a look at Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. And a big thanks to DidiKid.com for sponsoring this episode. They're a great resource for, well, anything kidlit related. So definitely check them out if you haven't already. Now, this book, I gotta say, it's like stepping into a time machine for me, Takes me right back to middle school with all the awkwardness, the humor, those moments you just never forget, right?
Oh, absolutely. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's a book that really resonates with such a wide audience, not just kids, but also parents and adults who might be looking back on those years with maybe a bit of
A
nostalgia.
little bit of, yeah, kind of cringing and laughing at the same time. But before we get too deep into Greg's world, I want to hear from you. What stood out to you while reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid? Were there
Oh,
any scenes that, had you cracking up or maybe cringing in recognition?
mm.
Any of that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that draws so many readers in is Greg Heffley himself. He is our wimpy kid. And let's face it, he's not always the most likable character. I mean, he's scheming, he often fails spectacularly, and his self-awareness, well, it seems to have taken a permanent vacation, I think.
He's definitely got that relatable but flawed thing going on, yeah. You can't help but laugh at his misadventures, even if you are shaking your head at the same time.
Exactly. And that's part of the brilliance of Kinney's writing, I think. He doesn't shy away from Greg's imperfections. In fact, those flaws are a huge part of his appeal. He's authentic. And his struggles with things like popularity, fitting in, and, oh, those crazy family dynamics are something we can all relate to on some level.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of family dynamics, we have to talk about Greg's family. I mean, they are a comedy show all on their own. You got Roderick, the mischievous older brother who seems to exist solely to torment Greg. And then there's Rowley, the sweet and innocent best friend who often gets caught in the crossfire. And of course, you can't forget the well-meaning but sometimes clueless parents.
They really are. The Heffley family, I mean, it's a perfect example of how Kinney finds humor in everyday situations. Their interactions are chaotic, over the top, but beneath all the craziness, there's this sense of love and support that really shines through.
I think that's one of the things that makes this book so comforting, for young readers especially. No matter how wild things get, you know that Greg's family is always there for him.
Yeah, it creates a sense of security, a feeling that even when things go wrong, and they often do for Greg, there's a solid foundation of family to fall back on.
Okay, let's dive into a specific example of Greg's, you know, wimpiness. Who can forget the infamous cheese touch? I mean, it's not just a silly gag, but it really taps into that fear of social ostracism that, so many kids experience.
It really does. It's brilliant how Kinney uses something as simple as a piece of cheese to represent this universal fear of being the odd one out, the one everyone avoids. It's a powerful symbol. And it's something that resonates with readers of all ages, truly.
And it's been a while, but I still remember that so vividly from reading the book. Speaking of things that resonate, one of my favorite things about this book is the way Kinney brings the characters to life through Greg's narration. I mean, who doesn't love a good dose of Greg's cynical observations about middle school life?
Absolutely. And those illustrations, too, those simple yet expressive illustrations really add to the humor, and they make the characters feel even more real. It's like you're peeking right into Greg's diary, or, as he would insist, his journal.
His journal, yeah. Speaking of journals, this might be a good time to remind our listeners that Diary of a Wimpy Kid is available in both hardcover and audiobook versions. You can find links to both in the episode description.
Oh, it's fantastic.
There's something special about curling up with a physical book, but the audiobook is fantastic too, especially for families who enjoy listening together on road trips or during bedtime routines.
I agree, and I think it's important to highlight the value of engaging with stories in a way that allows for a break from screens. Whether you choose the hardcover or the audiobook, Diary of a Wimpy Kid offers a chance to unplug, dive into a world of imagination, and just enjoy the simple pleasure of reading.
And you know what? I think that break from screens is something we could all benefit from, especially families. I mean, in a world where kids are constantly bombarded with digital distractions, taking the time to read together, whether it's a physical book or listening to an audiobook, can be a really powerful way to connect and unwind.
It really can. Reading aloud together, sharing those moments of laughter and imagination, it can become a cherished family ritual. A chance to unplug from the digital world, to bond over a shared story, and maybe even spark some interesting conversations.
Exactly. And it's not just about the bonding experience. Reading also have incredible educational value, right? I mean, Diary of a Wimpy Kid might be hilarious,
Yeah.
but it also subtly teaches kids about empathy, resilience, and the consequences of their actions.
It does, and it's a fantastic example of how a book can entertain and educate without being preachy. Kinney doesn't hit you over the head with a message. He lets the story unfold naturally, allowing young readers to draw their own conclusions and form their own opinions about the characters and their choices.
Right. He kind of just lets you, come to your own conclusions. I think that's one of the reasons this book is so effective. It encourages critical thinking. It invites readers to ask questions and engage with the story on a deeper level.
Absolutely, and I think it also sparks those aha moments that make a book truly memorable, Those moments where a young reader might think, oh, I've been in a situation like that before, or maybe I could have handled that differently. It's all about fostering empathy and self-reflection, but in a way that feels fun and engaging.
Yeah. So I'm curious, did any of Greg's family members remind you of someone in your family or a friend you had growing up?
I think that's part of the genius of Kinney's characters, They're so relatable. We've all encountered a Roderick, that mischievous older sibling,
Okay.
or a Rowley, the loyal best friend who sometimes gets dragged into Greg's schemes. And let's not forget the parents who are trying their best, even if they don't always get it.
Oh, I know, right? They're like these archetypes we all recognize from our own lives. It's that universality that makes the story resonate so deeply with readers of all ages, I think.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's that relatability that creates opportunities for families to connect, Imagine reading this book together, laughing at Greg's antics, and then sharing your own stories about similar situations from your childhood. It's a wonderful way to bridge generations and create those shared memories that last a lifetime.
That sounds wonderful. And, it's not just about reminiscing about our own childhoods. It's also about helping kids navigate the challenges and triumphs of growing up. Diary of a Wimpy Kid might be a comedy, but it also offers some valuable lessons about the importance of staying true to yourself, finding your people, and learning from your mistakes.
Oh, it's such an important message, especially in a world that often pressures kids to conform. Diary of a Wimpy Kid celebrates the beauty of individuality, It reminds us that it's okay to be different, to embrace our quirks, and to find humor in the everyday challenges of growing up.
It really does. And I think that's a message that's just as relevant for adults as it is for kids. We all need those reminders sometimes.
I completely agree. And speaking of reminders, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the importance of finding a healthy balance between screen time and other activities, like reading.
Yes. It's so easy to get caught up in the digital world. And while technology has its place, it's crucial to make time for activities that nourish our minds and our imaginations in a different way.
Yeah.
And reading, whether it's alone or together as a family, offers that opportunity.
Yeah. And it's not just about limiting screen time. It's also about being mindful of the content we're consuming. Diary of a Wimpy Kid is a great example of a story that's both entertaining and thought-provoking. It encourages kids to think critically, to empathize with others, and to see the humor in everyday situations.
Right. It's like a breath of fresh air in a world that's often filled with noise and distractions.
Yeah.
It reminds us that there's value in slowing down, engaging with the story, and letting our imaginations run wild.
And that's something I think we could all use a little more of in our lives.
So true. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. What do you think Greg learns by the end of this book? And how do those lessons, reflect the challenges and rewards of growing up?
Ooh, that's a great question. On the surface, it might seem like Greg doesn't really change that much, He's still got those wimpy tendencies, those self-serving schemes. But if you look closely, I think there are some subtle hints of growth there.
Yeah, I think so too. I think his willingness to take the blame for the cheese touch, even though it makes him a social outcast, I feel like that shows a glimmer of empathy and loyalty that we haven't really seen from him before.
Exactly. It's like a turning point for him. He chooses to protect his friend, even at his own expense. And while he might not fully grasp, the magnitude of his actions, it suggests this budding understanding of selflessness and the importance of true friendship.
It does. And maybe that's the beauty of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, in a way. It doesn't offer these easy answers or neatly tied up endings. It leaves us with a sense of hope. But also this realistic understanding that growing up is messy, it's unpredictable, and it's often hilarious.
Right. It's a journey we all go through, with our own unique set of challenges and triumphs. And Diary of a Wimpy Kid reminds us that it's okay to stumble, to make mistakes, and to laugh at ourselves along the way. The important thing is to keep learning, keep growing, and keep cherishing those connections that make the journey worthwhile.
I like that. So before we sign off completely, I wanted to give another quick shout out to our sponsor, DidiKid.com. They have a ton of resources for families to help create those shared moments of reading and connection that we've been talking about.
They do. They really emphasize the importance of family reading time, and we've seen firsthand how powerful that can be. It's about making those memories, having those conversations, and building those bonds that go beyond the digital world.
It is. So if you're looking for ways to connect with your kids, to encourage a love of reading, or just to share some laughs together, be sure to check out DidiKid.com. You won't regret it. And of course, you can find Diary of a Wimpy Kid in both hardcover and audiobook versions. Links are in the episode description.
Definitely check it out.
So on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Thanks for joining us on this journey back to middle school. Until next time, happy reading, everybody.